Chris, would you mind just going into, for the sake of some people here won't know entirely what an accelerator and incubator is, just your experiences with them, what you've done, and what
Sure.
your experiences with them.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So what's an incubator? Where people go with ideas, usually founders with an idea in a particular topic or an area, and they've got I guess, a process or a program that they put these founders through to incubate their idea and turn it into a business. And then the accelerators are kind of for the people that have started their business, or founders are on their journey, and then kind of, accelerating their business growth for them. Yeah, I guess that's it, Harry.
Fantastic. Thanks, Chris. And your experience, you say you're currently working with one of these as a mentor. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Cool. Can you walk us through how you connected, how it kicked off, and maybe how many companies you're currently working with?
Sure. So I'm an agility coach. So I'm the kind of role that startups are a bit like, yeah, we don't really need to think about agile ways of working until, we've got 100 devs. But actually, it makes much more value. I start at the beginning. So a couple of people I know that have worked at accelerators and incubators, and they know the work that I do as well. So talking about how to experiment, how to innovate, these companies that are embryonic stages, so pre being the company or just starting their growth journey, that's the time that innovation, experimentation, and being flexible and adapting is really, really important for them. Because if they don't, they kind of tend not to last more than 6 months. So I go along and I kind of work with their cohorts, and it could be anything from how you validating your product market fit. So validation is something a lot of startups forget to do because sometimes they're so wedded to their idea that there's no validating an idea, and it's getting them into that mindset of, do you know what, let's try this. How can we validate whether it's right or wrong, or it's the right thing to do for our customers, and then move forward and build on that. So I'm probably currently mentoring, I think, three startups across two different, one's an accelerator and one's an incubator.
Amazing. Okay, so lots to unpack there. So 3 startups, 1 accelerator, 2 incubators. So and they're on these different cohorts. So typically, how long would a cohort last, and how much of your time is going to be involved in that?
So about 8 to 12 weeks, the cohorts. My time, you kind of set your time, how much you're willing to give. So I tend to probably give on an 8-week cohort, probably about 4 hours. But that does depend if I have a connection with the founder as well. So one of the founders started working with, their cohort finished. And then they asked me if I would stay on mentoring them, and then we agreed a price for that. Lyndon, no one, if that question's for me, no one's funding my time. The mentoring I do is as a give back.
Great, thanks, Chris. And you mentioned that you did it some hours across like the 8 to 12 weeks, and then they asked for more time, and you stuck with them. Is that right? Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it just depends. So one of them offered to pay me to stay on. So we're like, we really get on. The advice has been amazing so far. Can we do this? I was like, look, we can do that, but that's going to be at least kind of 4 hours worth of work. I'm not in a position where I can do that and not charge for it. And then other times people have just recommended me to other people. So I've kind of got work off the back of that. But there is a nice feeling that if I work free, like fractionally, to give myself a bit of freedom. And one of the things I want to do is occasionally be able to just do something and not expect anything in return.
Yeah, it's always been one of these amazing things. So I mentioned the Meet a Mentor community that we run, and we had I think we've got something like 600, 700 mentors that have been involved in that. And it's always quite amazing that anyone that signs up as part of this program is physically signing up to give their time for free to someone they've never met before. And it's amazing how many people are out there that will do it. So yeah, and I remember at the beginning asking a lot of people, what's in this for you? Why are you doing it? And so much it was a case of just for the giving back, like had a lot of success in your career and just want to give back.
Harry, just before we move on, I think there's something about what you get back from mentoring as well, right? I get back so much from my mentees. One, the kind of seeing people grow, stuff like that. But there's times I learn so much about myself, and I'm like, a lot of the time, the advice I'm giving, I'm like, really? Why do I not listen to my own advice? Or why haven't I done that? Or shouldn't I not practice what I preach on this particular thing? So selfishly, and don't repeat this outside of here, you get a lot back from mentoring, personally as well.
Brilliant. All right, thanks, Chris. Mike, I saw your hand go up as well. I know you've got a fair amount of experience in this space. Can you add to anything Chris is saying there in terms of your own experience?
Yeah, hi folks, and well done, Barry. Not so long ago, you were saying weren't sure if you're going to have some folks on this call, and turns out there's 40, so you've been hustling. I'm probably going to share today from the other side. I've been involved in the world of startups, personally setting up, kicking off, running. So we've been participants in some of these accelerator and incubator programs, and I just thought I'd share what it was like from our point of view. And I think has already sort of suggested the differentiation between incubators and accelerators is important and meaningful. The acceleration piece kicks in, and this is kind of where, these programs, depends what stage your business is at and what acceleration means for you. So going in as a small business or a startup or a company into these programs is really depending on where we're at and where we think we want to get to. So we then think about the types of mentorship that's on the other side and zero in on the folks that can help us at the next phase of our journey, depending on what that might be. It could be very early stage, just getting that sort of value proposition together, or it could be we're on the funding pathway and looking to accelerate that journey and that process, so tap into the experience. But we also think of it, sometimes we've been a team of two, but what this allows us is for that 8-12 week program, which is sort of, as Chris mentioned, the standard timeline, the ability to almost supplement our team with skills that we normally wouldn't be able to access. So, it's kind of helps fuel the momentum that we're trying to generate by participating in these, either incubators or accelerators. Then, I know the sort of the theme of this is how does that evolve to become paid relationships for people who are willing to devote their time. As Chris said, so Techstars have the mantra pay forward, and that kind of becomes indoctrinated not just in the companies but in the ecosystem and the network. So everyone is willing to contribute, pay forward with a view of that just accelerates the greater good, and it will come back. And that's definitely been the case. We were in Techstars, gosh, back in 2018, and in the United States, there's some of those folks that are still helping us and supporting us today. And as we've been able to afford that help and support along the way, we've sort of contributed back. The other thing is, if we're not having been in a position to do anything financially, we've certainly made enough introductions to make it worthwhile for those folks who have supported us. Yeah, I could ramble on for this sort of stuff, easily, but I'll throw back to Barry just in case there's some specifics that we want to get into. I guess in a nutshell, I'm here to talk from the bottom up, and Chris can share from the top down, and the others who've had the mentor types of experiences.
I mean, one thing I'd be quite interested to know on that then, Mike, is how long you would expect to work with somebody before it turned into a paid arrangement. And I know that's not necessarily the right way you should approach this. The way Chris spoke about it there was perfect. Like, you shouldn't necessarily go into this and purely be like, right, I'll give you one session and then I get paid. It's not about that, and that doesn't necessarily lead to the right kind of introduction to this stuff. It has to come from somewhere within. But roughly, what would you expect, or what have you seen, or in your experience, how long you would work with somebody before it starts becoming paid?
So cheekily, as a startup, you just try and run these things as long as you can with respect, because it's all just powerful and also helpful. I think we're always very transparent up front. We're a small startup. We're on a sweat equity kind of basis ourselves. We're not in the position to pay. But what we promise is, and it has been helpful, is we'll do whatever we can to help through our networks plug you into either other opportunities or paid work, or kind of like, once you're on our team, you're on our team, and we'll do everything we can in our power, above and beyond sort of paid remuneration, to try and make some magic happen. Where we have had success in the past is, again, we've sort of consistently set up advisory boards with the different businesses. Again, pro bono, because that's the stage of the journey that we're at. We weren't looking for paid boards at that point in time. But that enabled folks to say that they were sort of doing some, board and advisory work. again, which looked good if they're looking to establish themselves in that journey. And secondly, as I said, we treated them as genuine team members, and some of them spent a long time with us because whilst there wasn't financial reward directly, indirectly, they were getting a lot of value out of it. And some of them have gone on to have, sort of significantly successful now fintech startup careers, even to the point of, chairperson for a couple of startups. So it's been a good win-win.
Amazing. Thanks, Mike. Mark, see your hands raised there.
Yeah, hi everyone. I think it was Chris mentioned that the average time he spends on each program is around 4 hours. I'm just wondering if that's a kind of generic average. So if anybody's got anything they can share, what would be like the average kind of hours you would spend over, say, one of the 8 to 12 week periods? Thanks.
Mark, I'll just jump in on that. A lot of the programs and the accelerators kind of have a minimum or like an average. 4 hours is tends to be the first couple of weeks because they get swamped with offers for mentorship, or the cohorts have got so many people they try and get round everyone. After that, I'd say it just depends how the relationship goes. But I'll shut up and let someone else talk.
Yeah, interested. Any other thoughts on that as a question? Like how long with each person? Not seeing any mutes. Nikki, I'll come to you. Are you still here yet? There you are, Nikki. I know I saw your hand go up initially as being involved in this space as well. What's your experience here? How does it kind of contrast or complement what the others have said?
Yeah, well, I mean, on a more formal basis, I'm supporting the NatWest Accelerator program going forward from September onwards, which is this month. But I think I'd even go stronger than some of the points that have been said, and that I think you actually have to go into it with an expectation of zero in return, because that way the ground rules are straight from the start. And if you go in expecting work, then you sort of got this like sort of hidden agenda to everything you do. And I think you should just genuinely go into it with the expectation of nothing, and then let the relationships take care of themselves in the fullness of time. I sort of have a mixed opinion about accelerators, because I think some of them are sort of specifically designed to, drag these businesses kicking and screaming to the top of a cliff, and then, drop them off and they land, crying and broken on the rocks of reality when they get into the real world. So I'm more a fan of accelerator programs that sort of try and prepare these startups for the outside world more than actually, just try and get them to a point where they can abandon them. And my perspective is also slightly different because I come from a sort of a CEO advisory, strategic marketing bent. One of my main missions, and I do mentoring not just formally but also informally. I mean, there are people on this call that know I will happily give an hour of my time for free to help people. So one of the reasons I do it is to help startups realize that marketing with a capital M begins before you even have a business. It doesn't come later. You don't get to the end of this accelerator program and then go, oh crap, marketing. Whereas actually a lot of people do. And even there's a bunch of Cambridge accelerators that I'm just getting involved with, and I actually asked the question in front of the entire conference: what are you doing to actually get proper marketing, business models, business plans, routes to market, all that good stuff? What are you doing to encourage startups to realize that that's a day zero issue, not a day 100 issue or a day end of the accelerator issue? And they looked at me with this like complete stunned silence, which is great, because now they've all asked me, can you come and help with that? So as much as anything, I see my role as to just change people's perspective about what they need to do to be successful in building a business, really. So there's not really a hidden agenda, because by the time I'm finished with people, they still pretty much end up in the, love you, got no money, brigade of people that I have in my life. And that's fine, because in the fullness of time, things work out how they're meant to. So I don't know if that helps or not, but I think the two perspectives are, go in expecting nothing. And then the other perspective, I know there's a lot of CTOs in this community. And I think the sort of the CTO type fractional model, I think, will lend itself to earlier stage businesses and accelerators. Because if you're going to ask an early stage startup, do you want to spend money on strategy, or do you want to spend money on developing a product? Despite the fact that marketing helps develop a product, 98% of them will go, I'd much rather have a CTO than a CMO, thank you very much. So I'm sure the CTOs have probably got a very different experience than I have, but I view mentorship as educating and paying it forward and having zero expectations. And that kind of works for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nikki. Tom, see you've got your hand raised there.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Just to share some experience with the group, I work with an incubator rather than an accelerator, so slightly different again in terms of that time commitment. I've really enjoyed the aspect of it's been over a longer period, so I could get to know founders better. And it's anywhere from kind of an hour to 5 hours a month, depending on if there's a review panel and then subsequent conversations. There might be a bit of a spike that month, and then it'll just be a check-in and a coffee and a bit of advice maybe if I can help. And in terms of how I got into that and why I got into that was purely for altruistic reasons, and some of that has led to paid work, but that wasn't really my goal. I made a comment in the chat earlier about testimonials, and I think Mike's point about as an advisor, as someone who's in startup leadership and then wanting to add this as a string to my bow over time, I suppose I've taken quite a long range approach to I want to just add value to these businesses, hopefully save them some cash by avoiding some of the pitfalls I've seen in startups, get things like business plans, etc. in early, help them with whatever else they need. And in return, if that leads to paid work in, now or in the future, that's great. But I think, just been said, like it will work out as it's meant to. So yeah, a slightly different approach to the accelerators there, but yeah, hopefully useful for people to know what you can get yourself into.
And Tom, it sounds like you've had a couple of different ones there, not just one company, but you've been helping out a bunch of different companies. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I've got two main ones. So one of them is still unpaid because they're super early stage, and the other one actually they raised a bit of money, and that's evolved into not a huge amount of advisory work, but some, and that's really nice because built a relationship across time. And advice is hard at the start, isn't it? Because you desperately want to help, but the more context you can build, the deeper the relationship. And I think 6-9 months in now, really starting to feel like I can have a better impact. So yeah, again, I'd probably look to add to that in the future, but that's been a really interesting learning journey for me.
Yeah, nice. And I think the case studies and testimonials are just like they're just worth so much. And if you've obviously done it for free, then I think like Mike was saying as well, you're then you're so keen to help the person back, to give something back if you can't afford to pay them. So those case studies are going to look very, very nice. Okay. So I'm interested to know from anyone that has had multiple different, that's helped more than just one or two companies, what a mentor can do or a company can do, what the relationship would look like. The ones that tend to go better, the ones that tend to last longer. Is there anything that you could do as a mentor getting into a new relationship that could increase the chance of that relationship going on longer? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
I can contribute my experience if...
Please, Leo. Yeah.
Yeah. So my name is Leo Bonkel. I'm a Fractional CTO, and I work. Can we talk about specific incubators or just in general?
I'm absolutely for you to. No problem at all.
One that has worked the best for me is the Founder Institute, and I think the reason is that the founders already goes away with a part of their equity to join this program, and they have like a pre-built agreement that you can just fill up. So it's really easy to transition from being part of the accelerator to becoming an advisor. But those companies are at the very, very early stage, so there is no really like cash reward, but there is equity. So I've been working with like 3 startups out of those incubators as an advisor, as a CTO advisor on their advisory board. And that's been going very well. Like some of them, I've been working with them for 2 or 3 years now. And they went from like very beginning to helping them grow and hire more people and all of that. So it's really like long-term game rather than maybe they'll become a customer, because at this stage you have like 0 cash anyway. So
And Leo, is there anything that you've found that's maybe different across those 3 that you've worked with, or any others that you've worked with? Any that you found have made those relationships stronger and made it sort of more likely to go long term?
In Zoo's incubator I worked at, I've never, like, it's always kind of like from the mentees request that they will book your time. And being in the engineering side of things, people often don't know they have an engineering issue. Like, it's very hard for non-technical founders to know they have a technical issue. Like, I feel like, accounting, sales, marketing, when you want it. But from the technical point of view, they're like, well, my product is good enough. I have the right practices in place, but they often don't know what they're talking about. So it's kind of hard to get connection from the input of the startup. So often that worked better when I got closer to the directing of the incubators or accelerators, and they could recommend the startup to reach out to me. And that way there's kind of like an authority, which is like, you should really go see Leo, that will help. And then from this authority, that often it's easier to make it become a longer relationship rather than them coming without knowing what they come for, and then they don't know what's going on, right? And often because they have this directory of hundreds of different mentors, it's really on the first hour, first 30 minutes you meet with them, it's like, it will work or not, right? It's like the first impression. If it doesn't work out, they're gonna just go to the next one in the list, and that's it. And if it works out, usually they will stick with you and not see somewhere else. So it's really like, it's kind of like a dating game, right? It's like the first ones that work, they will stick with it, and that's it. So you really have to be good impression the first time you meet with a startup. And you might never see them again if they didn't like it, or you might see them every week for the rest of the program if it worked.
Interesting. So, and you mentioned there getting closer to the directors, to the leaders of the accelerator and incubator themselves, right? If I understood that correctly, so that they can then recommend you and introduce you directly to the startup founders.
Yeah, because in those accelerators, in those incubators, like the big one, I work also with 500 startups, and those are like gigantic, and you have like thousands of mentors in the list. So often the startups are either they have no idea who they should reach out to, or they don't know what problems they need to solve. And so having the manager of the program or the director of the program as a connection will help you being the one recommended to be seen by the startups.
Okay. And so that's interesting. Again, 500 startups. So how big are these accelerator programs? How do they compare? And what does like the internal team look like that represents the accelerator?
It's often the bigger it is, the less catering there is, right? It's more like, here's a Slack channel, good luck. It's like, whereas the smaller local one, it's really like, okay, there's like 5 mentors, so they're really like, you're gonna see everyone. But in those bigger one, it's like, if you don't want to be involved, you'll be in the directory and you'll never see a single startup. But if you get involved, then you can see a lot more people. Like the Founder Institute is split per chapter, so you have access to the startups of each chapters, and they have access of the mentors of each chapters. But if you don't, you have to like kind of register office hours in their calendar, and if you don't do it, if you're not proactive, you will never see anyone. They also have events like pitch reviews, those type of things, and also if you don't involve yourself with it, even though it's happening, they won't reach out to you, right? Because I feel like those accelerators became so big that they don't really care for the mentor. It's really like the mentors has to fight to be able to volunteer. It's like you have to like fight for being able to bring value. Another advantage that hasn't been talked about that I found very interesting from me is that as a mentor in those large accelerators or even in funds, you get a better rate to invest. If you want to put your own cash into those programs, you often have advantageous conditions as a mentor. Like some of the fund I work with, the minimum might be like 250 grand, and that might be out of the budget. But as a mentor, they're like, yeah, it's fine. If you want to put 10K, you can, So it can allow you to get involved with large portfolios that you might not have access to as a private investor.
So interesting. All these things that you don't know until you do it. And it does sort of sound crazy, doesn't it? You've got to work hard to do the networking, to put the time in, be proactive, just so you can mentor someone for free.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of crazy. But for the Founder Institute, for instance, the more you do it, they have a system at the end that give you like a rating for all the mentors, and you get a bigger slice of the equity that has been paid by the startups to enter the program based on this rating. So if they've never seen you, you won't get anything because you won't even be in the ranking. But if they see you often and they give you good ranking, then you get a bigger share of the pie.
Very interesting. Brilliant. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Leo. Do we have Kieran here? I'm looking through the pictures. Yes, Kieran. I know you you had a chat with Chelsea earlier, didn't you? You've got a slightly different angle on this. Could you share your story on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm very much new to this sort of world. I had a couple of fractional gigs, and pretty much all my fractional gigs I found through my network. So I think here I view sort of working with and just the conversation that's been going previously. This is a way of just building network and making sure that you build relationships with people who will either recommend or move on. My current role is extremely different. So I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Rocket Internet in Berlin and the approach that they take. But I work currently for an incubator called Officio. We basically only started in sort of April this year. And we're taking the approach where we build companies ourselves. So we have a large number of theses of ideas which we would like to take to market. Some of them require research, which is where my team comes in. And I run a team of research scientists and research engineers. And we find solutions to these problems, build a prototype. And then we're looking to build companies around them. So the model that we'll take is we'll license the technology we've made to these companies. The Officio itself, because it's a knowledge-intensive company, can't invest, but the company, the employees can, and the investors of Officio can invest, obviously, in these companies. Now, what I'm looking for is actually how to meet fractionals, because I view fractionals as the key to our success. When we're in this very small stage, we may have an MVP. We cannot afford, full CMO. So for strategic marketing, we may not be able to afford, the sort of revenue ops people or COO or the growth on that side. Whilst I can do fractional CTOing for some of them as we scale, my bandwidth is going to become increasingly limited. So I will also need people with specific skills outside. So in a way, I'm actually looking to sort of see how you guys have found the incubators and accelerators that you've worked with, what you use to sort of qualify them, so that I can then see how best to engage you guys, because if we have a project which is, say, health tech, marketing a health device, this is far outside my experience. I've got experience in capital markets and a maths and philosophy degree. It's not going to help me build a medical device. So I'm kind of looking really here to see how you guys choose accelerators, and just listen. So sorry Barry. I hope that was clear from the chat earlier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's just a different angle, right? Like you obviously, Mike brought the angle of being the startup, and you have obviously being like more the incubator, or playing that role. So it's interesting to see. If I could just throw a few questions back to you then, Kieran, on that. So you mentioned about maybe a strategic CMO or CRO or something like that. How would you, like, I know for a fact we've got a bunch of those on the call today. So how would you, what would you look for? How would you judge people differently? How would you kind of, be able to assess that?
It really does depend on the project. Now, my brief is extraordinarily broad, slightly worryingly broad for me. I like to be able to focus on sort of narrow things that are well defined. I know that I don't have certain skills. I'm very aware of what I don't know, and I'm looking for someone who, I guess, shares our ethics, our values, our way of working, but it also gets results. And ultimately, results are what people care about. So a strategic marketing consultant to work with our project in health is likely to look very different to something that's maybe working in an agri-tech project or a fintech. I wouldn't expect them to have the same skills, and I'm basing that sadly on my skills, where I know that I've got capital markets skills and data skills, but there are other skills I don't have. So basically it would be a case of we chat, and I've been reaching out to lots of people through this community and others, just to see do we get on, do we think there's a good working relationship there, and if so, where are the strengths? If it's a retail project, do you have a track record in retail? Do you understand the problems? Can you mentor younger people? And this is the big thing for me. I say this when I'm interviewing people for our company. That one of the big mistakes a lot of companies make, but particularly in Britain, is you either promote people until they're out of their competence zone, or worse, you just hire on top of them, often people who have already been promoted out of their competency zone. And what I would much rather see is are extremely capable and bright younger staff members as they go from the incubator into the sort of affiliate companies full time, to have that sort of advice that when I had it in my career, it was invaluable, and when I didn't have it, I really did notice that it was missing. So again, it's would they work well with the team that we have in being able to grow them as professionals? Quite often you may have someone who's got a medical background and they don't know about sales. They don't know how to reach customers. So it's making sure that they're able to grow these people who have most of the skills but not all of the skills.
Brilliant, thanks, Kieran. Nikki, so you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, I just wanted to just make a brief comment, Karen, about the sort of from the CMO angle. I think the domain and industry in-depth experience is possibly slightly less relevant for the CMO side of things, because it's our job to cross several technologies and ask the right questions and come to a market with zero expectations. Admittedly, I would always say, my expertise is the fintech, the cybersecurity, the software, the telecoms, and that side of things. But at the same time, there are other people who do very, very different things who I can still very much help. And actually sometimes coming to it with no expectations means that I can approach, for instance, healthcare with a really open mind and a really blank sheet of paper, and actually possibly in some ways actually be better than somebody who's so deeply entrenched in that industry that they can't bring a fresh perspective to it. But like everything, it's about balance, because you can't come in being a complete idiot. And possibly it's the B2B versus the B2C distinction in marketing, which is perhaps more important to the role than actually the industry itself. That's just an aside, but as you say, it's about whether you share the values, the work ethic, et cetera, and whether you get along is the more important thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thoughts are somewhat on that. It's about the regulatory constraints. So I've worked in some heavily regulated industries before, where sometimes some of the suggestions we were getting from people just showed a complete lack of a naivety, which then just loses, loses the trust of the people that they're trying to work with. So
I would put that down to a brain power issue rather than a regulatory issue personally, but that's just my own experience. You do have, yeah. I don't want to get bogged down in regulatory stuff, and I completely agree with you. Lyndon's shaking his head at me like I'm a lunatic. The point I'm trying to make is that marketing is a much more transferable skill than some other skills. That's really the only point I'm trying to make, not get bogged down in regulations.
Can I, cheers, Nikki, and thanks, Kieran, on that. Can I move to Tom and Chris, who've obviously worked with different incubators or worked with different companies, and just tackle what Kieran was saying there in terms of how do you choose? Chris, I think you in particular said you worked with 3 different ones. How do you choose between these different places and between like what would make one look better than another, or vice versa?
So do I like what they're doing and what they stand for? Unpopular what I'm about to say, but there's a lot of greenwashing, a lot of washing of, oh, we're going to deliver impact, oh, we're doing this, we're helping underprivileged founders. So I kind of like to do a little bit of research, because the worst thing would be to be giving my time for free to these people or to the organization that don't really stand by what they preach or what they're intending to be doing. So are they doing what they say on the tin? Are they genuine people? Do I get on with the people there? Does it feel comfortable? If not, there might be something wrong. And just kind of, it's not so much about how long they've been around, it's more what they're trying to do for me.
Great, thanks, Chris. Would anyone add anything to that in terms of as a fractional, as a mentor that has been to different places, what would attract you to want to engage with the incubator or the accelerator itself versus another one? Tom?
Happy to add in, Barry. I think for me, it's a slightly different perspective in that I'm staying in my specialist lane, which is health and med tech. So there's instantly kind of and that's helped me get some traction in that I've been able to be very clear with founders in that, you know, if that's what you're up to, here's my background, worked in the NHS, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It helps that first conversation. And then, yeah, really just agree with what Chris is saying. Like, are they in it for the right reasons? What are they trying to do? Is that mutually interesting? Do I think I can add some value? I think it's a little bit like shopping for a house, right? You have your mandatories and you have your nice to haves, and I think actually sitting down and working that out beforehand would be good. I think someone earlier said, wish I followed my own advice. I wish I followed my own advice on that one, but it kind of learned as I went, had a few conversations, found some really great startups, and it seems to be working out okay. But yeah, I think it's have that list and think it through, and then learn from your first interactions, I'd say.
Great, thanks, Tom. Ravi, I can see you've got your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I think I've done quite a few things with, I guess, communities that try to help, I guess, organizations that try to help underrepresented founders. I think in both cases, I've had to actually just suck it and see. And to Chris's comment, I know that some of the founders that I've worked with have worked with large organizations, and it is pretty much the description I was given is a dog and pony show. So literally, look, aren't we great because we've got, you know, women or underrepresented women, which was actually really quite was quite disappointing, I guess, when we went through the program, because actually a lot of the support that was needed was not just, hey, we're on a, you know, I'm going to use JP Morgan as an example, but I don't think that was the one in my mind. But JP Morgan are really just giving us some stuff. We can go to their office for a bit. And that was pretty much it. The real support they needed wasn't actually that. It was, you know, investment and mentoring, and that wasn't available. So I think sometimes you just have to suck it and see as well. You might not find it out. And that's if you're working interim as well, not just on a fractional basis.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ravi. Aslam, are you still here? Sure, I saw you here a minute ago.
I am. Sorry, I just have to pop away from my desk for a moment.
Okay, mate. Are you happy to share your experience? I know you've got some great experience with mentoring in business that you've shared with a few of us before, but would love to hear your story. I think I saw a note that you'd mentioned there earlier as well that signposted. So yeah, if you're happy to elaborate as well.
Yeah, I've been working with Meet Mentor for I think about 4 years now, maybe approaching 5. And I've mentored people in multiple roles over that time. But at the moment, the main 2 people I'm mentoring are both startup founders of 2 different companies. One of which was founded by 2 brothers. And someone mentioned working with younger people earlier on, and they're significantly less than half my age, which is you know, a very interesting sort of dynamic. And someone else said, you know, you learn a lot from the founders, and you learn a lot about yourself, you know, in that kind of mentoring relationship. So one of those startups, I think when I started working with them, they were just about to complete their first year, and I think at the time they were turning over about 150k. Their most recent financial year ended recently. I think they've hit about 4 million, and they're on target to hit, I think, 20 to 25 million in about 4 to 5 years' time. And over those 3 years, I guess I've sort of been as much a sort of personal mentor to one of those founders, as well as a you know, a founder from a sort of startup perspective. And the relationship has kind of really been quite organic, I suppose. So that there hasn't been a sort of I think in the early days we started having sort of quite regular meets, but they've been a bit more sporadic in sort of recent times. And it's just whenever they found a need to sort of someone to talk to, I'm kind of there on the end of the phone, or a WhatsApp message. One of the things I have found, and someone did touch on this earlier on, is being part of this kind of community working with startups. It's its own ecosystem. Whether it's accelerators, incubators, investors, and so on. And personally, I found it's a bit tricky to break into this kind of network, but by working with some of the startup founders, that I've been able to improve my network. So that's something I'd encourage the rest of the group to try and do. Take the opportunity to meet founders, as many people as you can, and you never know where these introductions will come from. And one of the things I've really been able to help the founder with is introductions. So to expertise in, as we touched on before, marketing, engineering. Actually, one of my relatives based in Silicon Valley, he's got $100 million plus exit. So I was able to introduce him to the founder, and just to show, be an inspiration. Here's what you could do. A chance to speak to someone like that and learn about their journey. So it's it hasn't been the most sort of structured relationship, if I'm honest. But we've got to the point now where they've asked me to join their advisory board. And actually to help. They're so busy, they need some help in setting it up. So that's kind of one of my tasks in the next few weeks.
Amazing, thanks, Aslam. I remember you saying before, maybe a couple of years ago, when we had you on the London CTO's interview, about how you'd learned as much from some of your mentees as you taught them, and how much that had helped in terms of learning about. I can't remember exactly what it was, but learning about a particular new technology that you hadn't had a chance to use.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not a techie by nature, so it's a good way of keeping up with emerging technology or trends. There's a startup I have a sort of loose kind of connection with, that are based in Istanbul, and they're looking at a startup launch in Africa. And they've been doing a lot around sort of blockchain and crypto. And at the time, that was something, if I'm honest, I didn't really know much about. So it was just an easy way to find out about what was going on in that space. So I think it's definitely one of the main benefits as a mentor, whether it's a startup or an individual that you can get.
Fascinating. Okay. So I'm keen to ask one more side of this. We've got about 10 minutes left. So again, any other questions, feel free to put them in the group chat there. But one thing that I'm particularly interested in is how do you build those initial bridges with incubators, with accelerators? So for anyone here that has done this already, how did you get in there? Was it just through your network? Were you invited to get involved, or was it proactive? Have you gone out there and tried to get in there? Anyone currently working with an incubator? Chris, I might come to you. Sorry to pick on you first again. But how do you make those initial inroads?
Both times was just for a recommendation through someone either that knows them or is already there. I'm not going to say it's an invite, because that makes it sound like they actually invited me. It was more someone said, "Oh, you should go and talk to these people. They're doing this. They could probably use some of their founders could probably use X, Y, Z." So it went like that. I think I put it in the chat earlier. A lot of these incubators and accelerators have events where pitch nights, they have networking events. A lot of them have got fellows, so kind of fellowships where you can kind of register on. But I think someone alluded to earlier, I think it was Leo, some of them have thousands of mentors on their book. So I guess if just making something personal with them to reach out is probably the best way to do it.
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I spoke to Eagle Labs recently. And so we already work with NatWest. There's a bit of a bridge between NatWest and the FCC. And so we can make introductions there. We spoke to Eagle Labs recently, and it wasn't quite as clear cut as the introduction. I think there's ways in, but the guy that I spoke to was like, "Oh, I've got this event," and that, just echoing what you say there, Chris, was very much like, yeah, invite people along to it. And so we'll always try and put things like that out in the group. and that does seem to be a popular way to connect. Ben.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm new here. I've only recently started my fractional journey, but I've been doing business support for 12 odd years and mentoring for about 17 years in corporate as well as what I'm now doing. I found that I'm working with, so I'm in Nottingham, and the University of Nottingham has an innovation lab. So I'm working with the innovation lab to actually eventually to become an EIR, but with their mentoring scheme to and attending a lot of their events, because that's what I found. Again, it's just been mentioned, going to events that they're putting on, but be consistent going to those events. Don't just turn up at one and expect something. Go every time, because as soon as you're not there, then people will forget who you are. But also just to pick up on something that Chris mentioned earlier, and yourself, Barry, I found that I've learned most, or I've learned a lot from my mentees. So almost going into it as a mentor-mentor relationship rather than a mentor-mentee, so that you're actually going in at the same level with each other. But I found that if the mentee, the other person isn't engaged and isn't interested in doing in supporting their own business, then actually then they're not going to get anything out of it. They've got to actually be engaged, and they've got to have a want and a need really to actually get something out of that relationship. So and sometimes that might take sort of 2 or 3 meetings to finalize and to realize actually this isn't going to go any further, and it might not be, you might be the best fit for that person, but because they've not got that engagement, then they're just not going to be interested in actually implementing any suggestions, because they just don't want to do what they want to do. And another point which may help others, I've just become a mentor on the Help to Grow scheme in the UK. So I've got 3 or 4 people that have selected me, but I'm waiting for them to actually finalize and say they actually want to work with me. Again, the problem, and it's already been mentioned, Help to Grow have got thousands of mentors. So it's up to the mentees to trawl through that list to try and find someone that is going to be relevant for them. I was at an event this morning around UK SPF and the Shared Prosperity Fund that was put on by, again, University of Nottingham, and suggested to those guys there, they can find out who because they're one of the business schools that do the Help to Grow scheme. They can find out who the local mentors are, have a Meet the Mentor event, and work with Nottingham Trent University to, so both business schools are part of the Help to Grow. Get the businesses that need the support and the mentors in the same room, so that actually almost do like a speed date type networking event. So those type of events I have found useful in the past.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've had the business school as well, and another chap that one of the fractionals that we've been involved with for a good few years, Pedro, has always mentioned business schools as being a great way to connect, and how he's found a few of these mentees. Okay, so events, business schools, and again, it's just the classic, isn't it? The classic networking, just getting to know people and getting recommended in that way. Any other things that we haven't talked about as ways in? Anyone else come on board to help mentor in any other way? Nikki, yeah.
I think just make yourself available. I mean, every time I'm on a podcast or anytime I'm on anything, I make it really clear, my diary is open for a 30 to 45 minute, free chat with anybody that would like it. And then just make it clear that you are available. And it sounds really simple, the bottom of all of my emails, it says that, on my LinkedIn, it says that. And I think it just, make yourself available, and then, weed out the tire kickers as you go along, really.
Great stuff. Yeah, I see a lot of people now in the fractional world are having like a LinkedIn button just beneath their name that says, with a link to like a Calendly or something like that, where you're like, just book in a call here. Okay. In fact, one more thing I'm going to ask is boundaries. So I know this has come up again a few times, and we sort of touched on it earlier, but does anyone else have any thoughts around how much is too much? Like, I think I asked Mike in the end, and Mike was obviously on the startup side of the fence, and he was like, you know, as much as we can get, we're a startup with no money. That's the attitude there. But if we're now thinking about somebody that's just about to enter into this, going to start potentially putting themselves out there as a mentor, how do they stop from getting abused and having somebody call them every day? Can you do anything up front that stops that happening? Is there any kind of boundaries that you should put in place, or you'd recommend putting in place? Or has anyone had anyone that has abused their boundaries in the past? Any advice on any of those? Yeah, Chris.
I'd say just be upfront about it. So I do quite a bit of coaching. So I have a bit of like a coaching contract with people. So in the first conversation, set the expectations. If my phone number is passed on for whatever reason, make sure that they understand that it's not to be called at 3 a.m. when they're drunk having a meltdown about their co-founder. But yeah, I just tend to set the boundaries up front. And, you know, if I say to someone, great, we'll speak next week, and they're constantly messaging me, I'll either ignore it or I'll just get back to them and say, listen, I'm not available to kind of till next week. If you want to book some time in, here's a link, but I might have to charge for that. I think when you say that, people tend to get it. Most people tend to get it if you just give them a nudge and say, you're taking the piss a little bit, and they kind of get it and then they back off.
Great stuff. Okay, cool. Okay, well, we're coming up to 4 o'clock then. Does anyone have any final questions before we close? I feel like we're all safe. Okay, cool. I'll call it there then. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Oh, I've just seen Dan and Aslam have unmuted. Were they questions at all?
I was ready to say thank you. That was all.
Same.
Okay, guys. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for being here, especially everyone that's contributed in the chat and out loud. Really, really appreciate it. We'll follow up with you all through the Slack group or over email, and hopefully see you at the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Barry.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.